Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our February Wellbeing lecture. Today we're talking about sleep. Really interestingly, we put this lecture out there and it was sold out really quickly. So I don't know if that means we've just got a lot of people who need a sleep, or if, like me, there are a lot of people who are parents of very young children. But we'll soon find out. So I'm going to leave you with Andy today. Andy works for an organisation called Wellbeing. Andy is an expert in wellbeing. He's also a personal trainer, but you'll be relieved to know there isn't going to be any physical exercise today, or I'm not aware that there will be anyway. So I'm going to leave you with Andy. Please welcome into the university.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. We just hit afternoon. As Gemma says, I work for an organisation called Wellbeing. Essentially, we're a tech company, so we use technologies to identify trends and support organisations to look after the wellbeing of staff. Part of my role with Hero is as the Director of Development and Training. So I've really focused on the in-person services. So when we go into organisations, we look at all the different elements that have an impact on an individual's well-being. The things that have an impact on well-being can be vast. The things that we tend to focus most on are physical well-being and emotional well-being and psychological well-being. Would you consider sleep as being one of, if not the most vital parts of organisational well-being? Stand up if you think that sleep has the biggest element on well-being. So there's going to be a bit of standing up and sitting down. Okay, so that's most people. You can sit back down now. You don't get too comfortable, you will be standing up again. So we know that sleep has the biggest impact. Just out of curiosity, I'm just going to ask you some questions. I want you to stand up if you, on a weekly basis, if you do anything to benefit your physical health. So you go for a walk, you go to a gym, you do something to benefit your physical health, consciously. Okay, there's a few people rolling their eyes because you've got to stand up, sit back down. Okay, what I want you to do next, I want you to stand up if you eat something or drink something consciously because it's a healthy choice. So you might choose the water over the can of Coke, you might choose the water over the coffee, the banana over the chocolate bar. Okay, sit back down. Okay, and who consciously does something because it's good for your mental health? So you think, actually, I'm going to do this because it's good for my mental health. Stand up. Okay. Sit back down. A few, quite a few, but far less. So this is something that we're addressing in wellbeing because a lot of people don't actively do something that's good for their mental well-being. Now, sleep is highly associated with good health and well-being. So this is something we're going to look at today. My sessions tend to be really simple. I'm a Yorkshireman. It's keeping things simple is what I do. So we look at the problem. So where does sleep go wrong? We're going to identify what works. So we want to identify where people go wrong, what actually starts to work, and where can we go from there? What can we start to do to improve things? So here's a bit of scaremongering that we've identified in the media. So sleep's been in the media for quite a long time. You'll be able to see some pretty horrendous headlines in there. Hands up if you think there's a lot of truth in that. A few? Okay, hands up who thinks that's a load of rubbish just to grab tabloid attention. Do you know what? It's probably a little bit of a mix. If we look at some of the common issues related to mental health and physical well-being, a lot of it is sleep related. So there is some truth in some of that. Some statistics. So here we can see that men on average in the UK have 6.28 hours of sleep. Women, 6.36. Optimum bedtime, so when your cortisol levels, your stress hormone levels are at its lowest, between 10 and 11 o'clock. Hands up who goes to bed between 10 and 11. Hands down, that's most of us. 1 in 3 35 to 44-year-olds report a lack of sleep. Falling asleep, it should take, on average, it takes between 10 to 20 minutes for most people. 6 in 10 worry or report worrying as the main disruptor of sleep. So when we look at things that have a disruption of sleep, we look at things like stress, we look at things like light exposure, we look at things like caffeine or stimulant intake, but worry comes out on top. And then finally, 13% of adults have a higher mortality rate if they have 6 hours or less sleep. So we know that it has an impact on physical health as well. So we've got some questions for you to find out if you have an issue with your sleep. So first one, hands up, who struggles to get to sleep? Okay, that's most of you. Hands up, who has broken sleep? Okay, you're in the right place. Hands up, who wakes up feeling unrefreshed? So you're still tired when you wake up? Hands back down. Okay, I'm getting concerned. And hands up, who has bouts of feeling lethargic throughout the day? Okay, so when we think about this, this has got to have an impact on our daily lives. Now, when I think about well-being, the thing that I consider the most is when we look at daily energy levels, most people have this situation where they go to work or they get up in the morning, they feel tired, they've had a rubbish night's sleep. They go to work, they're pretty productive at work, they do the things that they need to do, then they get home, they might sort the kids out, they make tea, and then they crash. And then they go to bed, they have a very average or not very good night's sleep, and then they get up on the next day and they do the same thing again. And this is the difference. Most people don't thrive. Most people don't get to spend the time or the energy doing the things that they really love to do. Hands up if most days you do something that you would actually choose to do. About 8 of you, all right? Okay, so that's not a good start. So when we think about we think about well-being. Well-being is the study of health and happiness. But what makes us happy? The thing that makes us happy is getting to do the things that we really love to do. But what we're finding in the workplace, most people don't have the energy to do the stuff that they want to do. And it's this vicious cycle. And with energy, might look at somebody they don't have any energy because they're not physically active, but they're not physically active because they don't have any energy. So how do we break that cycle? So we've got to look at some simple things in terms of well-being to make some improvements. So the first thing we're going to do is look at sleep science. What does sleep look like? So I personally believe if we understand how something works, we can have a bigger impact on it. So we're going to look at this. So what we've got first, we've got falling asleep, we've got nodding off, we've got non-REM1. We go from non-REM1 to non-REM2, slightly deeper sleep, non-REM2 to non-REM3, and we've got non-REM4 right at the bottom. So these are all non-REM. Any ideas what the next box is going to be? REM. So REM is over here. So what is REM? REM is rapid eye movement. So has anybody ever stood over somebody and watched them sleep? Okay, a couple of hands almost going up. Okay, so REM, so I know that if I put my kids to bed I've got 2 little girls, if I put them to bed at 7 o'clock, if I go to bed at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, if I go upstairs, check on the girls, sometimes their eyelids are fluttering. If the dog's on the floor, snoring away, eyelids are fluttering, we know it's in the dream state. So this is what happens. So we go in and out of our dreams, and this is about a 90 to 100-minute cycle, 110-minute cycle. The thing that gets us to sleep, to start making us tired, is the production of something called melatonin. So when we experience darkness, we start producing melatonin, and that starts to slow down our brain waves, our beta, alpha, theta, and delta brain waves, and that gets slower and slower and slower. And we go in and out of our brain waves. So it looks a little bit something like the next slide. But before we get to the next slide, there's something that disrupts this. So something really common that we're starting to learn more about, we're hearing about it more on social media and in the media in general, and this is something called cortisol. So cortisol being referred to as a stress hormone. We need cortisol, it's essential to our performance, to good health, but in the wrong dosage, it can be damaging. So if we think about what impacts on cortisol, what kind of things are going to increase our cortisol levels to inhibit the quality of the sleep that we do get, we start to look at the really common things like caffeine consumption, light exposure, blue light exposure, using devices, and stress. So stress, I was talking earlier about how well-being's changed in the last sort of 10 years. So 10 years ago, when I first started delivering workplace well-being, I spent most of my time talking about sleep and energy levels and nutrition and back care and ergonomics at work, whereas now, probably 80 to 90% of the stuff I deliver personally is talking with managers on how to manage stress and mental health. So then we've got to think, well, why is this changed? What's happened over the last 10 years? Are people more stressed? Do you think people are just realising that it's an easy get out? Are people actually developing more mental health issues? Because the stats are going up. So when we talk about stress, anxiety and depression, the stats have gone from sort of 11.7 million working days lost in 2016. 2017 it went up to 12.5 million working days lost. 2018 it went up to 15.4 million working days lost. So these stats are jumping up and jumping up, and we've got to identify what is actually happening. And stress and cortisol production has got to be a key contributor. We've seen it over and over again in all different aspects of well-being. So this is what sleep might look like. So an average night's sleep. So you go from being awake, and what you notice is at the start of your night's sleep, your deep sleep, your dream state, or your depth of sleep is much longer. And as we go throughout the night, the depth gets shorter, but what happens is your dream states get longer throughout the night. So we do know that we're going in and out of these different cycles of sleep. This is what sleep would look like for an average evening. Now, before we move on to how that impacts on sleep and what an actual sleep cycle looks like, we have to have an understanding of how stress is produced. So most people, we use this term stress on a daily basis, but we don't actually understand where it came from or what actually impact it has on us. So this is a great slide I put together just to give you an idea about how it works. So we've got something called the HPA axis. So the HPA axis is the hypothalamus, pituitary and adrenal gland. So when we experience a stress, so when something happens to us and stress appears, or we get put in a stressful situation, the brain identifies that that is an issue, and we produce a series of responses for the adrenal glands to produce adrenaline and cortisol. And this is where the cortisol comes from, the HPA axis. That is fantastic, that's great, it's essential for our essential for health, essential to our survival that we have this response. So historically, we might encounter something that wants to eat us. Okay? So obviously, we have this fight or flight response that would say, I don't want to die, I'm either going to attack the bear, I'm going to run from the bear, I'm going to freeze so the bear doesn't see me. And once that situation's over, the cortisol level, we've got something called the negative feedback loop that would tell the brain the situation's over, turn down the dial, we don't need this high level of cortisol anymore. Everybody happy with that? So then, is that what stress looks like today? Are we attacked by bears on a regular basis? Now, if we didn't have this response, the bear would walk in, you'd think, oh, I like bears, and then the bear would rip your face off. That's not a good thing, okay? So we do need that response. It's essential to our survival, but it becomes a problem. Stress doesn't look like this today. What stress looks like today is probably this. It's being constantly contactable, high workloads, getting stuck behind someone doing 20 mile an hour in a 30 mile an hour zone when you've got to get the kids to school, financial well-being, and kids. That's my stressor, 6-year-old and 4-year-old. So can we get rid of that stress? Does it disappear? It doesn't. So the problem is, what's happening, this negative feedback loop is not getting switched off. And because it's not getting switched off, we're in this higher state of arousal for longer. So then that starts to create some issues. So the adrenal glands are the creators of cortisol, so they're little leaf-shaped glands that sit on top of the kidneys, and they produce cortisol in something called the circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is our natural sleep-wake cycle, and circadian rhythm means about a day. So we've got from 12 midnight to 12 midday to 12 midnight. Now we'll be able to see that sleep, or the cortisol production, is pretty low when we should be asleep. So if melatonin's high, we're in a good depth of sleep, cortisol levels will drop. That's great. Then the sun comes up in the morning, so you can start to see it starts to rise. It promotes hunger. It starts to peak and trough. Every time we eat, it might rise again. That's what an average cortisol production may look like. But the problem is we've got this drip feed of cortisol all the time. We're constantly asking the adrenal glands, I want more cortisol, I want more cortisol, I want more cortisol. Every time we have a coffee, every time we have a stimulant, every time we get stressed, a mini stress, every time we have an argument, All these different things that have an impact on us, even light exposure. So what ends up happening, we get this sort of flatlining effect. Now, this used to be considered something called adrenal fatigue syndrome. It's kind of changed, the ideas behind it since then, which I'll explain in a minute. But can you all see what the problem would be if you had a cortisol production like this? So what we've got is a situation where when we're asleep, and we should be in a good depth of sleep, we end up being tired but wired. Knowing that I need to be asleep, but I can't get to sleep. Or I'm wide awake in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, why can't I get to sleep? My mind's wandering. But then we've got this feeling where we should have plenty of energy throughout the day, being able to do the things that we want to do, being able to thrive, but it's too low. So the idea behind this is it's probably not a case that the adrenal glands fatigue under the pressure. That's less likely. What's probably more likely is that we have something called cortisol insensitivity. A little bit like with diabetes, if we have a diet that's so high in sugar all the time, and we're constantly asking the pancreas to produce more insulin and want more insulin, more insulin, more insulin, then eventually the body's going to get used to that high level of insulin and become less responsive to it. So it could be that the same is happening with the adrenal glands. But we know through high stress levels, people are not functioning very well. So what do we do about it? How can we improve our sleep quality in general? And there's some really simple things. Now, I've got this great job in Wellbeing where I go around telling people probably what they already know. So, by show of hands, hands up who knows why they're not as healthy as they could be. Most people, okay? I know that I'm not as healthy as I could be because I have an addiction to Maltesers, all right? Do I want to give it up? Probably not, but I understand why things aren't as good as they could be. So, to get back to this, to get back to a really effective adrenal function and an effective cortisol production, there's some certain things that we can do. So the first thing that we can do is look at what we're drinking. So drinking 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, might be fruit or herbal tea, something that's not caffeinated, diluted juices. We compare that to the effect of drinking the opposite. So tea and coffee, I'm not going to stand in front of you and say don't drink tea and coffee. First thing I did this morning, drove to a popular coffee shop, and I got myself a full-fat caramel latte. All right, I didn't go grande though. I just got tall. So you know what? Life's about living. It's not about restricting yourself or anything of the like. Then we've got things like caffeine pills. Okay, keeping ourselves awake, Pro Plus and the like, and then we've got the Monster, Rockstar, Red Bull, Red Thunder, all these energy drinks. Now some people look at those and think there's no way on earth I would drink one of those. Okay? I work with lots of different organisations, from obviously universities, I work with large supermarket chains, I work with insurance brokers, I work with banks, and what we're finding is because people have got such low energy levels, because their cortisol levels are just plateaued, they're relying on this stuff to get them through the day. I had one manager who works 10-hour shifts who was drinking 12 cans of Red Bull a day. 12 cans, so that's about 120 sugars a day, plus all the caffeine. So when you think about life expectancy, it's probably, you know what, it's definitely going to shorten if we rely on this kind of stuff. So that's got to have an impact. And then obviously the impact it has on sleep as well, high caffeine. And then we've got these three. Any ideas what these three represent? Don't all rush at once. Protein, yes, so protein is made up of amino acids, okay? Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. One of the amino acids is called tryptophan, okay? So let me ask you this question. Christmas Day, you've just had a big turkey dinner, what are you going to do after it? Sleep. Some people say get drunk. That's not the answer I'm looking, you might do, but that's not the answer I'm looking for, but sleep. So when we have tryptophan in the diet, it increases the production of melatonin. And as we've seen, melatonin allows us to improve our sleep quality. So could you Google foods rich in tryptophan and identify something that you could be consuming, that you don't have to do it now, all right? But food that's rich in tryptophan could consume something that could improve the quality of your sleep. Now we also know when we have tryptophan-rich food with the presence of carbohydrate, it allows that tryptophan to get to the brain faster. Hence why you feel drowsy after a big carb meal with protein in there as well. So tryptophan's a good one. We look at devices. So we think about the significance of device health. So using blue light, our bodies can differentiate the difference between sunlight and device light. You know, as soon as your brain or your eyes identify that you're sat in front of a computer screen, you're going to start producing more cortisol. You're telling your body you're awake. So what we need to do, we need to experience darkness. So as a famous local has said, put the big light on, turn the big light off, put lamps on, and start dying down the room throughout the night. Start experiencing darkness gradually throughout the evening. Then we've got physical activity. So by doing things like meditation, relaxation, stretching, going for a gentle walk, they're all things you could positively do on an evening that can aid sleep, but compare that to inactivity, excessive activity, and stress. Has anybody been and played a high-intensity sport on an evening and then been absolutely wired? Yeah, because you can't sleep. So it's about understanding what works for you. So a lot of this is about self-awareness. It's about recognizing what are the trends. What does a good night's sleep look like, and how did I achieve it? And what do I do on a weekly basis? So, what we can then look at is getting the room right. So the room needs to be cool, needs to invest in a comfortable bed, and we need to limit light exposure. And then we also need to work on our sleep-wake cycles. Now this is the difficult part. Depending on the industry that we work in, this can be the hardest thing in the world. So when we look at sort of one of my clients, supermarket staff that work in warehouses, and they're working throughout the night, or they're constantly working night shifts, or truck drivers, it's almost impossible. And we do know that it has a negative impact on long-term health. We'll look at police officers that maybe work 3 early, or 2 earlys, 2 mids, 2 lates, and then have 4 days off. How on earth can you get into this? So although these are the recommendations, I understand it is very difficult for some people to achieve any of this stuff. So it's about doing as much as we possibly can. Strange question. Does anybody sleep with a pillow between the knees? Couple of hands. So it's a bit of a strange one. Now, hands up if you sleep on your side. Right, almost everybody. Now, you might be able to see this from here, but if I sleep on nobody sleeps like this. So if I've got one leg rolled over the other, what's happening in this position? You've got a big rotation in your lumbar spine. If you're laid in that position for say 6, 7, 8 hours, there's a good chance you're going to develop lower back problems. You're going to develop musculoskeletal issues because you've been staying in that position for too long. What do we notice about this person's spine? It's neutral. Yeah, we've got a nice neutral spine. So using a pillow between the knees is fantastic. Terrible for your love life. Once experience tells me, once the pillow's there, nothing else is happening apart from sleep. All right? So just bear that in mind. So then what we've got to do, what it comes down to, is building a bedtime routine. Anybody got kids? Yeah, a few kids. So I've got, like I said, I've got 2 little girls, Scarlett and Aurora, and their bedtime routine looks like this. 6:30, everything goes off. TV's off, no screen time, it's done. Leading up to bed, so 7 o'clock, we get them in the bath, get them washed, get them dry, get them dressed, get them into bed, read them a couple of bedtime stories, might play a little song for them, all the lights are off, give them a little cuddle, and then we close the door and pray that we don't see them again for 12 hours, all right? Now that works most of the time. What would the difference be then if I said, look, okay girls, stay on your tablets, turn Peppa Pig off at 5 to 7, get yourself to bed. What would happen? Carnage, yeah? They would definitely not go to sleep, they'd be kicking off, it'd be a nightmare. But most adults don't have a bedtime routine. Most adults, so we'll have had a bedtime routine when we were younger, our parents will have facilitated it for us, but somewhere along the lines we'll get out of it. So I'll tell you what bedtime routine looks like for most people. We watch TV, a big light box. TVs are this big now, that's a fact, all right? So you've got this huge light box, and then what we do is we look at the light box, and then we say, right, I'm going to go to bed. We go upstairs, we brush our teeth and pee in the lightest room in the house, all right? and then we lay in bed wondering why we can't get to sleep. We've done absolutely nothing to facilitate it. So, what can we do? So, first thing we can do is identify what time do we want to be asleep. So if you've got some paper, what time, what does sleep look like? What time do you need to be asleep? So for me, I know that I need about 7 hours. And my alarm tends to go off at 6 a.m. So I know 11 o'clock, I need to be asleep for me to get my 7 hours. So then the next thing I've got to consider is, what time do I need to be in bed? How long is it going to take me to actually fall asleep? So if it takes me 20 to 30 minutes to fall asleep, I need to be in bed 10:30. Before I do that, what can I do that's going to relax me? So what kind of things are relaxing? Okay, so it could be reading a book, it could be taking a warm bath, it could be doing some yoga, some mindfulness, some relaxation. These are the kind of things that can start to suppress. So earlier, when we looked at stress, when it comes to stress, we've got the brain and we've got the spinal cord. Then branching off there, we've got the peripheral nerves. And the peripheral nerves have two separate signals. We've got the sympathetic and we've got the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is your fight and flight response. Heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, adrenaline, cortisol, all those things get elevated. We need that in short doses, not all the time. The opposite of that is the parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic, everything gets slowed down. So cortisol, heart rate, blood pressure, all these things start to reduce. But what can we do that stimulates the parasympathetic, the thing that allows us to relax? And quite often it could be something like mindfulness. Hands up who practice mindfulness. Okay, so let me give you a bit of an idea about how important mindfulness is. In workplace wellbeing, the thing that I'm seeing the most is people taking long time off with stress. So what ends up happening, we get to a point where we get that ill, that frustrated, that we get to breaking point, and then we take the time off. And then what happens is, we take the time off, somebody goes off work, and they don't do anything. They relax, they might go on holiday, they might phone some friends, so they start to feel a bit better. But then they come back to work, and guess what? The stress is still there. They've done nothing to change or impact or the way that they control their ability to manage it, their coping strategies. But what we do know is, every now and again, someone will put their hand up on one of my courses and they'll say, you know what, I do practice mindfulness. And I practice it because when I took time off last year, I went to see a counsellor, I went to see a therapist, and they recommended that I should do mindfulness. Because it's a great coping strategy, a great way of reducing heart rate, blood pressure, cortisol, adrenaline, all those things. It's a great way of bringing it all back down. But most people don't do it. But we know it is a great way of managing stress. Now, what you've got to ask yourself is, if you walked in today and you saw me sat, I'm going to sit on here, if I was sat here, not too hard, if I was sat on here with my eyes closed, breathing, doing some controlled breathing, what does that look like? Yeah, but judging by a few laughs, it looks a bit strange. But why does that look strange? It looks strange because not many people do it. But if we look 50 years ago, if you saw someone running down the street, what would you think? You think, what's he nicked? Who's he chasing, or who's chasing him? Because people didn't have a tendency to put some running trains on and go for a jog. Because we didn't think of physical health in those terms. But whereas now, it's totally socially acceptable to do that. So 50 years from now, 20 years from now, hopefully 10 years from now, things like mindfulness and coping strategies for stress will be much more acceptable. So in the workplace, what I want to see in 10 years is when someone's just sat having a moment, do some controlled breathing for 5 minutes, they don't have to be humming, they don't have to have the incense lit, okay? But just having a moment to themselves, the perception will be, you know what, they're just taking a moment, not this person's slacking off, they've nodded off, they're dead asleep because they're too shattered, okay? So it's about changing perceptions. So we know that actually mindfulness, doing something that suppresses the sympathetic, this is the thing that works. So whether it's using an app, whether it's using a controlled breathing technique, that is the kind of thing that's going to enable you to relax and recover and bring everything back down. The other side of it is when we think about mindfulness, mindfulness is often described as being in the present moment. Now, we talked about the things that get people stressed. So, if we have work, we've got, I've got to drive back to Leeds, I've got to get on the M62 again on the way back, it's always a nightmare. You could think financial issues, family issues, all these different things. Can we get rid of that stuff? No. But what we can do is have moments of calm. And if we have moments of calm, everything gets lowered and everything starts to improve. So that's something that we can take a look at. And then we'll look at limiting stimulants. So at what point can we start to limit stimulants? So caffeine, I've heard, obviously you ask different professionals give you a different opinion, but they say that the half-life of caffeine can be somewhere between 6 and 10 hours. So if you have a cup of tea, cup of coffee at 8 o'clock in an evening, the chances are that's going to affect the quality of your sleep. That's going to increase cortisol levels and reduce the depth of the sleep that you get. So is that something you could do? Could you go away from here today and build a bedtime routine? The answer is yes. All right, just in case you weren't sure, I thought I'd give you a bit of help. Okay. Now, do we also, this is just something I sit around, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and think about things, and this is one of the things I was thinking about. It's like, what about wake-up roulette? Sometimes, this is a strange concept, I know, but sometimes, can you go to bed at the same time, wake up the next day, your alarm goes off at the same time, one day you feel great, you feel well rested, the next day you feel absolutely shattered. And there's nothing that's changed. The only difference is you feel more tired on the following day or the previous day. There's no consistency to it. So your body, your alarm clock, doesn't know what stage sleep you're in. So when you wake up, your alarm goes off and you're in sleep stage 3, you're going to feel absolutely shattered. You're going to feel unrested, you're going to feel tired, you're going to be a bit miserable. Also, if your alarm goes off in sleep stage 2, or sleep stage 1, or when you're dreaming, you're going to feel quite happy. You're going to wake up feeling better because you're in a lighter sleep. So if you're a miserable sod, more often than not, start thinking about this, okay? Because it might be you're not a miserable sod. You might actually just be getting woken up in the middle of your deep sleep, all right? So, what does a good sleep look like? So good sleep would look like falling asleep within 30 minutes. A good sleep looks like we might wake once, if at all, during the night. If we do wake, we fall back to sleep within 20 minutes, not laid awake looking at Instagram. And we wake up feeling refreshed. Can anybody, hands up, say that they have a consistent good night's sleep? I'm counting 1. Well done, you win the prize, okay? But that's pretty shocking. So it's not a surprise that people don't feel very good. So like I said before, well-being for me is about enabling people to thrive and get the most out of life. And you know what? We should be able to have the energy to do the things that we want to do. So when we think about the actual effect a good night's sleep and then good energy levels has the next day, if you were to ask me what my motivation is for my personal health and well-being, well, for me, it's having a good night's sleep so I've got the energy to do the stuff that I want. Now that looks slightly different. So for me, personally, if I've got a good night's sleep and I have good energy levels and I can be productive at work and then it takes me 2 hours to get home on an evening, if I've got the energy, or if I don't have the energy, I'll sit on the sofa, I'll say hi to the kids, and I'll sit there knackered. That's not a good state of mind to be in. Compare that to if I do have a good night's sleep, I do have good energy levels, and I do get home and I've got plenty of energy, what am I more likely to do? I'm not going to say hiya kids, I'm going to get in the garden, I'm going to go in the toilet, I'm going to go play with my children. Now when you think about actually what impact does that have on my kids' lives, my life, my enjoyment, family dynamics, it's absolutely massive. So as a hook for me to want to improve my sleep and energy, that is huge, because it means I get to do the stuff that really has an impact. So improving sleep quality is definitely one of those things that we need to consider. So what about technology? We know that technology can have a really negative impact on the quality of sleep that we have. Does anybody use their phone in bed? Come on, be honest. Who's looked at Facebook or Twitter or a Kindle or do something in bed? Okay? General rule of thumb, the bedroom is for 2 things. right? Twitter is not one of them, all right? So, although technology is great, it can enhance our lives, it can be devastating to our sleep as well. But we can also use technology to benefit us. Does anybody use a sleep app to track the quality of the sleep that you get? So this is something that you might do. Okay, lots of different tech out there where you can actually monitor the quality of your sleep. So one of the things that we do as an organisation, we link up with these and we can identify how much consistent good sleep are you getting. And if you're getting consistently good sleep, guess what happens? People start feeling better. Satisfaction scores go up. People feel happier. When was the last time you felt really happy? It was today, it was yesterday, not 3 months ago, because people are getting consistently better sleep. And these are the kind of things that we can start to look at. And if people are getting consistently good sleep, why are you getting consistently good sleep? So technology is great at identifying those trends. Then, headspace, or the like, calm, meditation, relaxation. So what this does, when we look at technology that allows us to relax and recover, it's not something where we're looking at screen time. It's something that you might put on your bedside table, and it might be something that you listen to on an evening that allows you to take your mind off all that other stuff. So it's bringing it back to mindfulness. So for me, I discovered this Sleepcasts about a year ago, and it's on every single night. Now I don't mind talking about Down the River. Down the river, it talks you into a relaxation state where you're drifting, you're in a little rowing boat and you're drifting down the river, you can hear the calls of the wild and all this kind of, it sounds absolutely potty. But, you know what? I fall asleep. I've never got to the end of it because every single night I drift off and it works for me. So, you know what? That might work for you. It might not. But it's finding something that does. So, what I want to do, before we move on, I want to give you a bit of an example of what it feels like, focusing on something tangible. So, sit back in your chairs. So I get you to close your eyes and I take everybody's wallets. So, I won't really. So what we're going to do is put your hands on your thighs, palms up, on your own thighs. It's not that kind of seminar. And what we're going to do, we're going to focus on breathing. So we're going to do something called 7, 7, 7, 7. So you're going to inhale, you're going to close your eyes in a minute, you're going to inhale for 7 seconds through your nose. You're going to hold your breath in for 7 seconds. Then you're going to exhale for 7 seconds. And then you're going to breathe in again for 7 seconds. So it's inhale, hold, exhale, hold, and then repeat. 7, 7, 7, 7. And while you're holding your breath, you'll be able to feel your heart pulsing. So I want you to just have a think about, what's your heart doing? How fast is it going? Can everybody do that? We're in a university, you just count it as 7, all right, and breathe in. It shouldn't be too bad. Okay, so close your eyes. Just want you to do it twice over. Go for it. Some people's seconds are a lot longer than others. So come back to us. You all look calmer. Do you feel calmer? Hands up if that didn't work for you. Be honest. If it didn't work for you. Do you know what? Is that okay? Of course it is. But do you know what I'd say? Go and find something that does work for you. Practice it. Now what you'll find with trying to get to sleep and using a technique like this is your mind will start to wander. And then what you've got to do, you've got to recognise that your mind's wandering and you pull it back again. And then what will happen is your mind will start to wander again. And then you pull it back again. But what you find is over time, the more and more you do it, your mind will wander less. You'll be able to think about the thing that you're focusing on. 7, 7, 7, 7, being in a rowing boat, whatever it is. But when you're thinking about that, when you were thinking about 7, 7, 7, 7 and your heart rate, what were you not thinking about? And what you weren't thinking about is workloads, emails, kids, financial well-being, all those other things. So it's about having small moments of calm. And when we can have a moment of calm, what you'll find is all those things start to reduce. So is that something you could invest in? Building that into your routine, something that's going to suppress all those things down. So, as a summary, pay more attention to your sleep. If it's not something you're actively thinking about, it needs to be, because it has an impact on everything else that you do. Your performance at work, your social life, your ability to exercise and train to a better level, all those things are impacted by the quality of your sleep. Be physically active daily. Now, we talk about physical activity. Does anybody else hate cardio in the gym? Okay? I despise it. So do you know what? I don't do it. Right? You don't have to. The brilliant thing is, you don't have to do things that you don't like. All right? You can actually find something you do like. So it might be going for a brisk walk. It might be taking the stairs instead of the lift. All those little things that add up. Then we've got building yourself a bedtime routine. I'd say that is the key. I know as a parent, if I don't have a bedtime routine for my kids, there's no chance they will sleep. But most adults assume that they're just going to get to sleep okay. So this is something that you can invest in. It doesn't have to take an hour, it could be half an hour. Anything that gets you into the mindset of sleep. Has anybody got a sleep playlist? Yeah? So I've got a playlist of quite embarrassing songs that I won't share with you. Might have Celine Dion in there at some point. But what happens is I know that that is my sleep playlist. If I put that on, if I'm not using Headspace, I'm out. Because that is a thing that I associate with going to sleep, and it facilitates it. Limit stimulants. So what time can you drink your last tea? What time can you have your last coffee? What time can you start shutting down your laptop and the TV and start having a bit of time away from the screen? These are all things that you can build in. Create the right environment. So like we said, make it cool, make it dark. Get that pillow between your knees. Aim for both quality and quantity. So it's not just about getting 7 or 8 hours. It has to be the good quality stuff. So like we saw, it's about not waking up, or if you do wake up, getting back to sleep after 20 minutes. It's about waking up feeling refreshed. So when I asked you how many people wake up feeling refreshed, most of you didn't. So when you think about it as a collective, that's pretty shocking that most people don't have a good night's sleep. And that's probably because you're all here. All the people that do have a good night's sleep are in a different lecture. I get that. Create lasting change. Now, one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking about is behaviour change and how we can actually put something into practice. So it's really easy for me to come over here and then talk to you about you should do this, you should do that, this will work if you do it. But what's the likelihood of you actually going and doing this stuff? Hands up, who said that they were going to do something before, but you've not actually done it yet? Most people, okay? So as Gemma said, I was a PT for a number of years, and someone like the fitness industry thrives on this. We thrive on people not committing to change. When you join a gym, you get 3 options. You can join for a month, you can join, which is most expensive. You can join for a 3-month membership, which is slightly less expensive, but it's still pretty expensive. Or you can join for 12 months. What do most people do? They join for 12 months. But then what happens is they realise, oh, this doesn't feel nice. This is uncomfortable. This is hard work. So you know what? I've not had a nice experience. I'll give up. But the gym manager is laughing his head off because you just signed up for 12 months. And then what happens is you get to November, you put in your notice, and then January, you feel bad about yourself again, so you join again. Okay? It's just like a merry-go-round. People go round and round and round for years. So it's about creating something that's more long-lasting. It's about having a different approach to change. So I had this situation where I'd given up chocolate. So obviously talked about Maltesers already. So I had this situation where I gave up chocolate for New Year's resolution. I said, no more chocolate. I don't need it in my life. I'm done with it. I've had chocolate today already. So, it didn't work a long time. So this was when I was 30. At 30, I thought, you know what, I need to get control of myself. I'm going to give up chocolate. And I gave it up. So for 2 weeks, I'd given up chocolate. And then what happened was, I found myself 2 weeks later, I don't know how it happened, I found myself in Asda car park with an empty box of 6 cream eggs, right? And I'd eaten the lot. So then, what do you think I felt like? So first of all, I felt sick because I'd just eaten 6 cream eggs. Then I felt really ashamed. Yeah, I didn't cry, but I felt ashamed because I'd just given up on my goal of giving up my chocolate. And then at 30 years old, I had to sit and think about the conversation I was going to have with my wife, why I wasn't going to be able to whip my tea. All right? That's not the kind of thing you should do at 30. So, but what it did do, it got me thinking about behaviour change. I expect as a trainer, I assume that people will be able to commit these high levels of change. Whether it's building a bedtime routine, changing eating habits, getting more active, it's quite a big thing. And we assume that people will do it, but actually, if I can't do it as a trainer, as a wellbeing coach, how can I expect other people to do it? So I came up with this idea of something called what I call the 8-6 principle. So the 8-6 principle is the idea that in every calendar year, we've got 8 blocks of 6 weeks. Now, if you take something simple, like building a bedtime routine, within the next 6 weeks, could you build in a bedtime routine? In 6 weeks. We're not going on a crash diet. We're not revolutionising your lifestyle. You're not losing 15 stone in 3 weeks. Yeah, it's just a simple thing like building a bedtime routine. So in the first week, yeah, it might be a bit of a challenge. You start, but you make small steps. So the first week, you might just do something like try and get to bed on time for a week. Then the next thing you might do is start doing that thing that relaxes you. You might find something, experiment, find something that you find relaxing. You build that in. The next week, you might do something like cutting out your caffeine earlier on. The next thing, you might have a go at with different apps to see if there's like a Headspace or a Calm app or a mindfulness app, something that you can use. Then you might start putting a pillow between your knees for a week. But what you've done is over that 6-week period, you've built a new behaviour. And the likelihood is, because it's not been difficult, it's not been over-challenging, the likelihood is by the time you get to the end of the 6 weeks, you've created a new habit. And then what you then become somebody that's experienced a change and you've actually succeeded. Most people don't succeed when they create a change or create a new lifestyle habit because they try too much too soon and it feels negative. So you've created something worthwhile, and then at the end of it, you're in the headspace where you think, actually, that wasn't too hard. I've created something that's more long-lasting. How am I going to feel going into the next goal? I'm going to feel pretty positive. So the next goal might be something like drinking more water and drinking less caffeine in general. Is that a hard thing to achieve in 6 weeks? It's not. But then, if you commit to really 6 or 8 really simple goals throughout the year, that all last 6 weeks each, in a year's time, how much healthier could you be? Really, really simple things. Could be more walking, could be anything. But as adults, how fast does a year go? It goes like that. Now, I know how fast a year goes because the last person I PT'd was a guy, I used to call him Old Phil. All right? Now, Old Phil, I started training him when he was 75. All right? I trained him for 10 years until he was 85. When I stopped training him, I found him another PT. So Phil is still training. At, 80? He'll be 88 now? Okay? Now I was talking to Phil about my daughter, and I said, well, Phil, I cannot believe, my eldest, I can't believe she's 5 already. And Phil said, you know what, Andy? I can't believe my daughter's 65 already. All right? He said, time just goes like that. He says he remembers picking her up from the hospital, taking her home. 65 says you're old when your daughter is cashing a pension. But it does, you know what, it rings true because, you know, if you think about the space of a year, we can change so much. All these little changes, but they all add up and they all build routine. So if you pick one simple thing, it could be anything. Building your bedtime routine, and you stretch it over 6 weeks. Think about what impact could that have long term. And then you can start to do something with it. Anybody got young children? Really young? So the advice is there. It'll get better in about 4 years. Yeah. I'm stumped. Yeah, I've had kids, mine are 4 now, it's starting to get better. That's my only experience. So, if anybody has any questions, if anybody's got anything they want to ask me, I'm hanging around for a little bit afterwards. Not too long though, because I've got to get back to Leeds. But yeah, pop over. You can follow me on Wellbeing Coach 6, Hero Wellbeing. Take a look at our website, find a bit more about what we do. But otherwise, thank you very much. You might as well all clap.